Yay! We're live with Cosmic Divide episode 22. I think maybe it's 23. Can't remember. Hello, TMV. We're done with week one of VCT finally after a long, grueling stint of watching Valorant. How are you feeling?
Tired. That's a good way of putting it. Pacific not doing me any favors this year because last season there was always like there would only be like one game on Monday and there'd be like no games on Tuesday. So you got like a kind of like 2 days where you can kind of refresh and then start back up. But this year Pacific has decided no, F that. Now that we're going to be playing games every day, so now there's no rest days. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm having to pick and choose some games that I'm like, oh, that's just not worth a watch. Which I think, again, my main takeaway from this is if I go back to last week, one big thing that I thought last week was that the Masters Madrid teams might struggle because they've had no time to prep. Whereas, the teams coming in playing them have had like a whole month of, just pure like prep, scrimming. Can watch these Masters Madrid teams play and, anti-strat them hard if they want to, right? Because they won't have time to change anything. Turns out, the truth of the matter is, those teams that went to Masters Madrid are just generally better than most other teams. And other than the exception of Loud, who had an even more extreme case
Right.
of not being able to prepare, everyone else I think did pretty decent. Off the top of my head, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, so basically, if you're good, prep time doesn't matter.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think, at the end of the day, these are gamers. They are used to playing a lot of games in a row. And generally speaking, if you're playing against high level competition and practicing against high level competition, you're probably getting better at a faster rate than most other teams. And this whole narrative of like, oh, well, they're showing too many of their strategies is, I think it's, at least in my opinion, is losing a little bit of its credibility as like, oh, well, if they've shown all of their maps, they're surely going to lose this game because at the end of the day, like, it's very hard to read the game in the game. And so just because you might have watched 20 VODs of Sentinels play Split doesn't mean that you actually understand how to beat them when you don't have full information of the minimap. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think we often perhaps read a bit too much into things like for instance, I'm sure if you ask some IGLs like, hey, why did you change your mind here and like come back to B? I'm sure some of them will just say, oh, I don't know. It
yeah.
just felt like the right thing to do at the time. Like,
Yep.
there was no like sick read that I had. We just went B. um,
Yep.
yeah, but anyway, a lot of Valorant, constant Valorant. I'm Valorant pilled and will be until Shanghai starts pretty much. So yeah, shall we just dive in?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, we're gonna try and cover every team. There will be varying degrees that we go into stuff because
Yeah.
there's not necessarily that many interesting things to say about some of the teams. Um, we are going to basically just go directly into our predictions for the next week, and as we do that, we will talk about each team that we're covering. So that will be the structure of the show. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Pacific. We'll start with Pacific this week.
That has some
And
banger games, by the way. Well, actually, now it's not looking as banger as it was, but it does have some good games this week, Pacific.
yeah, and so I'm pulling up my predictions.
Okay.
We
Yeah, go
don't really
ahead.
have to go over the. You know what? What we'll do is we'll make the our current prediction stats public to everybody. I think
Hmm.
would maybe be the
Oh
funny way
yes,
to do
how
it.
how convenient for you to choose to do that
So
as you're
people will
in
be
the
able to
lead.
keep track of how our predictions are doing. But obviously, I don't have access to your predictions, so you can just see mine
Yeah.
at the moment. But we'll just be doing week two predictions, and then if you guys want to see like what our predictions in the past were, we'll post the
Yeah.
spreadsheet or screenshots or whatever. So first game of week two is going to be Genji against Paper X, and oh boy, what a game to start off the week with.
Yes. What a game. Let's start with Gen G because I think they're a bit easier to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Because Gen G just looked pretty good. They did have some struggles, I thought. There was still some moments where I was like, like, ooh, that wasn't quite as good. Like particularly on their attack sides, I thought were a little like sometimes it got a bit messy, but on the whole, I mean, the individual talent was still frying. They looked like they were playing just a team that they were better than, to be honest, and they started off just destroying. Like Talon, like kind of brought it back. But yeah, Genji looked good, and I mean, if you look at Genji's group, I was bringing this up in my stream. If you look at everyone else in Genji's group, lost, and like Genji are finishing top of this group 110%. Like, there's no way they don't. And then they only have to win one of two games to make it to Shanghai with extra time to prepare. Like, Genji are going to Shanghai, and then therefore almost guaranteed, like, they
Going
should
to
go to
champs.
champs as well. So yeah, it's looking good for Genji across the entire year, and yeah, they look pretty good. Paper Rex, though, what did you think of Paper Rex and Jing's return?
Okay, so I have to be perfectly honest. My knowledge of Pacific is a little bit limited at the moment, just because there's been
Mm.
so many games, and I've been
Yeah.
quite busy with other stuff as well. So I haven't been able to like fully watch a lot of these series. I watched part of the Paper X series. I did not watch any of this Gen G one. I just look at the stats and okay, texture's insane, and the rest of Gen G is also doing well, and talent is very inconsistent.
Yep.
Okay, so makes sense. Paper X, Jing slots in, and they have great firepower, and they have better flow than they had with Munyet, and they look pretty good. I do wonder whether they're just back to being like 2023 Paper X form, which means that they're really good, but maybe not good enough to win an event. Possibly, we'll see. I don't know. I guess what is your opinion? Like, are they going to be able to take the next step, or is they just like back to being as good as they were, but every other team is maybe getting better, and we'll see whether their form just like peaks at the right time, or what?
Uh, phew. I think long term, I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
I think short term, there's still some rust there in general, right? And this is the thing. Everyone's gonna think like, oh, you swap Monyet for Jing, everything's gonna be back to normal. But even with the other four players, during Madrid, during kickoff, whatever, like take Monyet out of it, there was still times where you clearly saw like we're just not quite on the same page, right? Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
not quite a well-oiled machine. Um, and that's the thing. For me, Paper Rex, like I always say that Paper Rex, when they're playing bad, it's because they think that aggression is the thing that wins them games. And when they're
Mm-hmm.
playing well, it's because they know that combos are what wins them games.
Right.
Um, and I feel like and I feel like in this series they were still a little bit off against T1. The thing is T1, and we'll get to another T1 result, but maybe that brings your T1 stocks down a little bit. When we were coming into this game, a lot of people, including myself, thought T1 are like the clear third best team in Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Probably you don't think that so much anymore.
Right.
So maybe you look back at this game a bit differently, but I thought on the whole, I definitely still thought Paper X were the better team and deserved to win this game, even if it was like close on both maps. But I still think there's definitely some rust there. There's definitely still some moments where you're like, oh, that's not quite good enough. But I do still think they'll be pretty good. However, as we said, they're playing Gen G in this game.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be easy. And if you do have rust, and obviously we saw Gen G destroy Paper Rex at Madrid. So how do you feel then going in Gen G Paper Rex?
I think probably I'm gonna have to go with Gen G in this one, just because
Mm,
to me they kind of have like the combination that seems to counter Paper X pretty well, which is that they have comparable firepower,
yeah.
but they don't get lost in the sauce and the chaos too
Mm,
much.
yeah.
You know,
They got a good
like
structure.
they're willing to brawl, but they're not willing to get drawn into your game plan. So I would personally pick Gen G. I think it's going to be a good game, but I think that Gen G is probably like a step above Paper X currently in the season.
I 100% agree. I think Gen G showed in their game like there's just moments of Gen G's game where not only are people like their aim all looks insane, but like just the double swings, the triple swings, the timing
Mm-hmm.
of it, like it just looks good. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just looks polished. And I think that that's the thing we saw at Madrid, right? Like Sentinels and Gen G looked somewhat like a finished product, right?
Right, exactly.
They looked good, whereas everyone else it was kind of like, there's room to grow here. And yeah, so put me down for Genji too, because yeah, I definitely agree. Shall we move on to our next game, which is perhaps now all of a sudden like a team potentially in chaos that we didn't expect because T1 are playing against DRX, and let's talk about that T1 game. So T1 lost to Paper X first. They played twice already, right? So they lost to Paper X. Fair enough. That's fine. It was close.
It was
Everything's
very close,
fine.
yeah.
Everything's fine, right? Everything's fine. Then they lost to DFM.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
DFM
So
finally beat a team, and it was T1.
right, which is the most surprising part of it. I mean, everybody I think kind of knew that DFM was eventually going to win a game, and it's always just a matter of who's it going to be against. But I think
I don't think many people thought it would be this one.
yeah, exactly. And it was, I guess it was pretty close. There was one dominant map for T1, which was their Lotus, which I think they've been dominant on like the entire year so far.
Yep.
And I will say, we'll get to DFM eventually, but I think DFM actually looked pretty good. I think they looked pretty good.
Oh no, yeah. This wasn't just T1 throw. For those of you who didn't watch the game, this was not like, oh, T1 are just throwing. DFM genuinely did look good. Apart from on Lotus, they didn't look that great. But on the other two maps, DFM genuinely did look good.
Yeah.
And DFM played well enough to where they looked like the better team. That's perhaps more of a concern for T1. Is I don't come away from that game thinking that the better team in that game lost.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I guess going back to T1, okay. First of all, I'm just going to go ahead and make my prediction. I'm going with DRX. We'll talk about DRX in a second, but I think the thing about T1 is I feel like this game shows us a couple things. First of all, it shows us that I think Carpe continues to be maybe a little bit of a liability in terms of his output in a lot of games. But also he's like the IGL, so he kind of has to be there. It's not like he's terrible, but like it's weird because he has such a like storied career in FPS. But to me, he looks like mechanically the worst player in the server most of the time, which is strange to me. Maybe it's because he's focused too much on calling. I don't really know. But yeah, it's just kind of a weird team. Like they're not bad, but they're just losing a lot of situations that it feels like I'm like, how are they now going from a 5v5 to like being one person down? Or, they're going, instead of going from like a 5v5 to a 4v4 to a 3v3, it's like they're going from a 5v5 to a 3v4. They're just always losing like one extra person kind of in these engagements. And I'm not entirely sure why that is,
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, you talk about Carpe, like it's interesting, isn't it? Because you often think like the correct Overwatch players, and like Saya, is a good example. Like, are often, frying, and just often, the most mechanically gifted players, right? Your Overwatch players often in terms of, hitting insane up shots and stuff like that. But yeah, for T1, I mean, look, they're 0-2 now. Like they need to win this game. That's what's even more like, perhaps pressing than it. Like they have to start winning games. Like you can't start 0-3 and expect good things to be happening. Then your back is completely against the wall. So they need to win this game. But let's flip to DRX, who I think have looked good. I think they've looked sharp in their 2 games that they played. Yeah, okay, they're not playing against like the best teams, but I think that they've just looked very solid, very strong in the games that they played. The kind of Foxy, I mean, I didn't think he had it in him, right? I thought that Foxy was just going to be like if he's not on Duelist, he's just useless, right? He's just not worth playing, not on Duelist. But he looked good in some of these rounds. He looked insanely good.
Yeah, he looks like a demon on this Sentinel role.
yeah. I mean, because he was playing Viper before sometimes, and it was like he looked lost. But now he's playing Killjoy or whatever, and he looks like really good. So they look good. Bane coming in as well. looks good. So yeah, DRX it looks good for DRX right now, and so I don't see how I can't pick DRX in this one because I think that they look strong. Like for me right now, it seems somewhat clear to me right now that I'd be surprised if it wasn't Genji Paper X DRX going to Shanghai from Pacific just off that first week that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me with DRX is that we should just not doubt the system. Like,
Mm.
their system has always been good in Pacific, right?
Yeah. When we get to internationals, we'll see. But yeah, within their own
Right.
region,
They're basically the level of players that they find and sign and the way that they develop them into like a consistent performer in these specific games is always going to just put them in the top 3, seems like, because the quality is just too good and they have enough structure to where a lot of these more chaotic Pacific teams just kind of fold under the pressure that they put on them.
Yeah.
And also, like you mentioned with Bane, I think hopefully whatever is going on with Flashback turns out all right for him. I don't know what's going on there. But it seems like it was probably something that was happening maybe behind the scenes for a while. It wasn't just like a last second, all right, this guy is now no longer playing. Let's hurriedly throw this guy into the system. Because it seems like they've played with Bane a bit. He seems to work well with them. And yeah, I mean, honestly, really no drop off from Flashback to Bane in terms of output. Because Flashback looked like a very good player, and we were kind of concerned, they're losing like a very good player. But Bane also looks very good. And like you said, Foxy's kind of been like a revelation so far. He's maybe been their most impressive player so far in terms of performance.
Yeah. So we're both going DRX.
Yep.
Let's move on to
DRX.
Now this one, I feel like maybe we will get some difference of opinion. Let's see. Team Secret versus Zeta Division. Two kind of middle of the pack teams, perhaps. Team Secret did lose their first 2 games. Let's start with them. And having watched both games, I didn't come away feeling that different about Secret, even though they lost both games. They lost to DRX, which, as we said, DRX looked good. And then they lost to RRQ in a very close game. And I was like, this is the most RRQ Team Secret game of all time, right? Like, just extremely close.
Complete coin flip between these two teams.
Yeah, just a massive coin flip. It goes to map 3. We go to overtime. Like, of course it does, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how these two teams have to play a game against each other. So even though Team Secret lost both games, I actually still felt like, there's still rounds where I'm like, what are you doing? Like there's still a lot of like, oh, that doesn't make that much sense. So why did you do this? But there's also some times where you're like, oh, that was a nice round by them, right? Which is often what these kind of middle of the pack teams are, right? They're not always bad, but they have moments where you're like, that's not very good either. And so that's for me just who Team Secret are. With Zeta Division though, well, I want to hear what you think about Zeta Division because they beat Global Esports. That's the only game that they played. What did you think?
Yeah, so this is another game that I've only seen parts of. And I think that Zeta they're just kind of, they haven't really done anything to make me think that they're not like a, maybe a 4th place at best team in the region. Is kind of where I would say. It's like their firepower is pretty good. Sometimes they're good. They have a couple maps where they're particularly better than others. But also they're prone to just, sometimes playing poorly or not having the right people pop off at the right time. I think they're certainly better than last year, but also everybody around them has gotten better as well. So it's a little hard to say like where their ceiling actually is. And I don't really know whether I have more confidence in them yet. It's like I feel like they could be okay. They could be pretty decent this year. And I also will say that I don't think that GE is a particularly bad team. I think that they've made some steps since kickoff, particularly in their second game, which, we'll get to them eventually. But I don't think that GE looks terrible either. I think Zeta looks like a better team, which is, maybe not a great sort of endorsement of their performance. But yeah, I think this is one of those games where it's like, even though Secret's 0-2 and Zeta is 1-0, I maybe lean towards Secret by like a couple of percentage points. Again, I think it's kind of a coin flip.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. For me, Zeta in their game, like kind of a weird one because they absolutely destroy Global on Sunset,
Yeah.
and it looked like it was just one of those games like everything they do works. Right?
Yeah.
If they've decided to stack a site, Global are hitting that site and they're gonna run into a stack. If they try and get aggressive, they've hit the perfect timing, everything works. Like everyone's hitting their shots, it was insane. They then go to Icebox, and Icebox looks like not a good map for Zeta. We saw in kickoff they got destroyed on Icebox a couple times.
Mhm.
And then in this game as well, I thought that they were a bit fortunate to get to 10 in on Icebox. Personally, I didn't like what I saw really from Zeta
Mhm.
in that one. And okay, then they close it out on Acend, and it's like, okay, you're better than Global. I thought that already.
Right.
So yeah, I think that this is a real coin flip. I'm gonna let you choose first because I might just choose the other to
Uh,
get a bit of a different prediction going.
Man, okay, so like I said, I think logically I would maybe, just based off what I've seen, I would maybe pick Secret, but I think the heart is going to take over. I'm just going to go Zeta
Okay.
because
Okay.
I really do think it's very 50-50.
Yes. Yes, I'm totally with you. I think I was slightly leaning Secret, so this is good. You go Zeta, I'll go Secret. We'll have some difference here. I can
Okay.
try and catch up. Next we've got Bleed versus RRQ. Now, as the resident Bleed fan, talk to me about Bleed and their loss to Talon.
um, okay. I mean, what the fuck are these guys doing? Like, they have, okay, so they win on Lotus, playing a
Yeah.
regular comp.
Mm-hmm.
Ye has a couple beefs on Raze, but actually plays relatively well. I think his Raze is fine. It's not like a, wow, this guy's a Raze like virtuoso, but it's like he's playing the agent. You know, it's fine. His aim looks good. The pieces around him are okay. And then things kind of go off the rails. They're playing a strange comp on Bind that I don't think they're playing correctly. And yeah, they Icebox again, also strange comp, doesn't work out particularly well. I think I'm just gonna go with RQ.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like it's so hard for me to like give analysis on Bleed because I think they're actually just playing the game on hard mode. Like, how are these players supposed to perform well when they're playing comps that don't make sense unless you play them in a very particular way? It's basically like
Yeah, I
they
think
they asked the players, "How do you feel about playing this comp?" And the players were like, "Cool." But then the players are playing it as if it's the default comp, and that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that that's the thing. It wasn't necessarily the comps themselves. I mean, look, I would just say play Viper on every map. Like, just why are we not playing Viper on? Like, if you aren't playing Viper on Icebox, you better have a good reason of not
Yeah,
playing the strongest agent in the game on
yeah,
like the map where even when Viper wasn't the strongest agent in the game, everyone is always picking Viper all the time. Now, like, you better have a good reason, and that reason wasn't really there. I don't think that they like. So for me, like Bind, I'm totally with you that like their comp, I just don't think that they played it like the way that they played that comp just didn't fully make sense with what the comp was.
yeah.
Um, on Icebox, see the no Viper stuff, I don't really think that cost them in that game. To me, it was more just like everything they do is so slow. It seems right,
Mhm.
like and especially like when you and you know this is a tough comparison to make, but you know, like if you watch Bleed react to something, and then you watch like like one of the top teams react to something, the same similar sort of thing, like the speed difference in like what
Mhm.
the players are doing, how they're using their util in that scenario, like how the rotates are working, all that kind of stuff, like is night and day.
Yeah.
Right, it's night and day with a team like Bleed. It sometimes it does look like they are playing in slow motion because that something will happen and it like takes like a beat. It's like beat, beat,
Right.
and then the reaction comes. It's like what? How is it taking you that long to like communicate or like figure that out? And I guess part of it might be that we've got this mismatch of all these different pieces from everywhere that they it takes a while for people to process what's going on. But yeah, it doesn't fill me with a a ton of hope really, because if you wanted to be hopeful about Bleed, like Talon is the kind of team that you got to be able to beat.
Yeah.
You got to be able to beat that team if you
Yeah.
want to have like hope. So
And
yeah,
I
and
will
RRQ,
say,
come on,
sorry, I
you
was
go.
just gonna say, I will say with Talon, they're a team that I think they showed it last year and also at kickoff, and it's just like there's a team that will randomly show up and just like have really good
Yeah,
maps. Like everybody's hitting. They're like a very chaotic team, and if you're not ready
yeah,
for them to just all be shooting you, then you can be in trouble. But if you are a solid team, you should be able to handle that like
yeah,
pretty easily, right?
yeah, yeah, 100%. And yeah, RRQ, like RRQ are like the good example of the other side of the coin, I think, of
Mm-hmm.
what you're perhaps hoping Bleed would be, which is just kind of like a solid team. Again, they play Team Secret like as close as possibly could be. And I think RRQ are probably gonna be that kind of team that, you know, it's kind of like maybe a Giants-esque team from last year, beats the teams that they're, just more solid than,
To be clear,
just
not
doesn't.
Giants from this year.
No, not Giants from this year. Giants from last year, who they beat the teams that they're supposed to, they lose
Yeah.
to the teams that they're supposed to. That's who RRQ are, and they play a coin flip with Team Secret.
Yep.
That's what I'm seeing for RRQ, and with Bleed in the current state they are, I would have to go RRQ based on that logic.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't see. I could see Bleed winning this game if they maybe figure some stuff out, or get the right map veto. But I think RRQ is probably like a pretty solid favorite at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Now Genji DFM. Let's start with DFM. We already talked about Genji. So DFM, they won a game. They
They won a
finally did
game.
it. And as we
They
were
did
kind of
it.
talking about the T1 discussion, they actually looked good. Like
Yeah.
an actual good team, which is crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. They're
I
playing against
mean,
Gen G though.
maybe it's not that crazy because they're literally just a team that has been together
Yeah,
for like,
that's true. That's
you know.
true. That is true. But I do still think like whilst and look, whilst the FM did look better in kickoff than I expected, right? Whilst it was maybe a tiny bit more competitive. Like I feel like that narrative now that they've won this game is going to get way overblown. Like
Hmm.
they lost 13-8, 13-8, 13-7, 13-11. Like really there's only one close map there.
Hmm.
Like that's not that impressive, right? So we don't need to revisionist history this and say, well, dear, like they did look better than perhaps you expected because the expectation was the fucking dirt. The expectation was the lowest of the lows. So to
Yeah.
me, they definitely have improved since that point as well, right? It's not just that, yes, they were better at kickoff than maybe expected, and then they have improved again, and now look solid on different maps. Like they have nice reactions to stuff. That they have nice team play sometimes. I mean, there was a moment on the first map against T1 where there's this great little flash over the top. The timing is insane with this KO flash that came on over towards B, and then they're playing an interesting comp on Acend as well that I
Yeah.
like. They were doing some cipher setups that I think they found mega value from. So it was all kind of good, but nowhere near good enough to beat Gen G.
Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing about DFM is okay. This can be either a positive or a negative depending on how you want to look at it. But if you look at their overall 3 map series stats against T1,
Mhm.
only May, their duelist, their Raze player, is actually performing better than most of T1. According to the VLR rating, T1, 4 out of the T1 players outperformed everybody on DFM except for May. So, it's like, okay, maybe the firepower on DFM is really not good enough to sustain like wins over the course of the season. Or maybe it's saying that their teamwork is actually what's winning them games and it's not the firepower. And so in one sense it's like, okay, so maybe their teamwork is pretty good and that's great and that's a good foundation to build on, which maybe puts them at, they could be a relatively consistent low to middle of the pack team. Or maybe you look at it and you're like, oh, well, maybe they're going to get stomped and they just like had, a nice kind of like free win because they played a comp that the other team wasn't ready for and couldn't figure out and they got one other map win. I don't know. I'm fairly optimistic just because they won a game, but obviously, like you said, they're not going to beat Genji. There is essentially zero chance that they beat Genji. Like
Yeah.
maybe this might be still the easiest prediction that we'll make of the entire week.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the thing is though, for like, if you can beat T1, and again, that the stats that you're bringing up are probably being somewhat skewed by Lotus, where T1 did look good, and
Hmm.
DFM, they do still have rounds, by the way. DFM, that it is like, what are you doing? They have
Yeah.
moments and parts of the game that are just like, why didn't you? I mean, they were in a 1v1 and had a chance to do a Viper's Pit like on Lotus and didn't, and then had another golden chance to do it in round 12 when they're going for a B hit and didn't. And it's like, and then they die without using the Viper's Pit in the half, even though they had two like obvious, like, you must pit this scenarios, and they didn't do it, and they ended up not having a Viper's Pit in the entire half. And it's like, what are we doing? So there are definitely still moments where it's like, what is going on? But I actually think like, hey, if you can beat T1, that shows me like a level. Because again, I thought T1 up until the DFM game, and I don't think the T1 did anything like crazy bad.
Hmm.
I thought T1, did stuff that made sense. I thought the T1 had found like little things, particularly on Sunset, that were pretty good for them. But DFM were just able to beat it anyway. So my stocks are
Dude,
actually pretty high for DFM. I would rate them probably like above quite a few teams in Pacific now. Like legit, like 6, 7 kind of range, not
dude,
like 8, 9.
the one of the last rounds on Sunset where they're kind of like scrambling for the B site and
Mm.
they're trying to plant and the time is ticking down. If the planter dies, they lose the round, and Neff has to
Oh, he's just
save his
going,
planter.
do, do,
He
do,
kills the
do.
guy to the left, swings around, kills the guy to the right, and it's like saves the planter. It was just like, oh my god, this is the type of play that you need to be able to
Yeah,
win these games. And
yeah,
it was a play that we would never have seen from last year's DFM.
no, yeah, 100%. So DFM stocks up. Unfortunately, playing Gen G, unlucky. Go. We'll
La-
see you next week.
Last one I do want to ask. Okay, so in DFM's group, we have DRX, PaperX, which we both believe are going to make playoffs very easily. Then we have Zeta, RRQ, DFM, and Talon. There's a world where DFM makes playoffs, which would be crazy.
Oh yeah, I think they
Yeah.
can compete. I think, look, they've got like in that group, T1 will probably beat some of those teams, right? So it's like, okay, let's say Genji just beat everyone, right? DFM then just need to, can they beat Team Secret? Yes. Can they beat Bleed? Yes. Can they beat Global? Yes. Like, if they win those 3 games, of course they're going to playoffs. They're 4-1. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they might only need to go 3-2. Depending. Like, if they can get some 2-0 wins, and
Yeah.
keep their losses close as well, they might only need to win 2 of those
That's
3.
wild.
Which at that point is like, obviously, like, they can beat Bleed and Global. Like, if you
Yep.
beat T1, of course you can beat Bleed and Global. So yeah, things are looking pretty decent for Detonation. I'm feeling good about them as a nice story to add to Pacific. Let's move on then to well, speaking of one of those teams, to two teams that man, who am I gonna pick in this one? Global versus Talon.
Yeah, this is
Let's
an interesting one.
let's start with Global, I think. Um, Man, I don't know what, like, I don't think too highly of Global.
Yeah.
I I you were saying earlier that you don't think they look that bad, and to be fair, I don't think that they were like, I didn't come away from the Global game thinking like, oh my god, they're definitely not going to win a game.
Yeah.
I didn't come away thinking that, but I still think it's messy and muddy, and
Yeah.
I don't like it.
So I think maybe the best I saw from Global was when they were playing. There was like 3 or 4 rounds against DRX on Ascent where they were just playing incredibly slow and they were just letting Polvi just like contact stuff with the op. He was getting a pick and then they weren't overreacting and then they would just like continue to keep it slow. They'd wait for the reaction from DRX. They get another pick and then they would just like kind of like gradually take space and move into a site. I thought when they were playing at that pace, it was pretty good. I could see what they were doing. I could see what they were cooking. And then they would play around where they would do that, and then they would randomly decide to teleport the spike over to the other side of the map and try and like take a fight against two people who have no idea there's a lurk directly next to them and lose that fight and then lose another 1v1 and then lose another 1v1 and then lose the round. And I was like, oh boy. So I would say for positives for Global, I think they have some interesting ideas. I think this leaning on the op, I know there's a lot of people that are talking shit about how it's like, oh, Polvi is he's just literally only opping. On attack, he's buying the outlaw when they have guns, and then he's buying that so he can buy the operator in the next round. And it's kind of weird and it's kind of one-dimensional. But honestly, he's a pretty good opper, and you know, I'm all for having interesting ideas of how to approach the game. That being said, a lot of the time it feels like they have like a specific script that they've decided on, and if anything disrupts that script, they're just going to keep running that script until like it grinds into dust. And so I definitely worry about their ability to like change course without completely fucking everything else up.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Global are gonna win a game when like Polvi is gonna have a day where he just pops off. And Global will win that game. Just out of nowhere. When no one expects it, that it will happen. Because Polvi is very, very aggressive. Way too aggressive in a lot of moments. And does overheat and does cost them rounds. But there's gonna be a day where he's being aggressive and he's overheating, but he just hits the shot. And they'll win. And he just has a really good day. And I think that is how they will win. Is Polvi will just have a really good day. And Talon might be the kind of team that kind of day could exist against.
I don't think so, personally.
Okay, you don't think so? Am I gonna pick Global? It's surely not the right thing to do. It's surely not.
Cue the GE fighting music. GE fighting.
Yeah, it's probably not the right thing to do. I think I'll go Talon. Yeah, I think Talon have just got enough about them to be able to win this. They still, I mean, it's tough because they were playing against like, I mean, you know, they beat Bleed, so it's like, okay, and then they lost to Gen G, so it's kind of like you don't really know where they shake out too much because it's like, yeah, you're better than one of the worst teams, which I guess Global are probably down there too. So yeah, I'll go Talon, because they've perhaps proven against Bleed that they can at least win that game.
I think GE are in that camp where it's like, I'm just gonna pick against them, for the entire season until they win. Because I just don't believe that they're a good enough team to beat anybody, really. But I know that they will beat somebody at some point.
Yeah. Okay, and then we can kind of go faster now because we've been through all the teams. T1 RRQ. Ooh. Oh.
Yeah, this is a head scratcher as well. I mean, T1 has to win this game.
I mean, if they lose to DRX as well, then they definitely have to win this game. Ooh,
exactly.
T1 RRQ. That's a tough one now. I think I'm going to pick T1.
Going against the RRQ, huh? I understand why you're picking T1.
They can't be 0-4, surely. Can they?
I mean, they lost to DFM, man.
I'm picking them. I feel good about it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of am tempted to also go for T1 here, but I'm just gonna go RQ so we have a bit of differentiation. I don't know. It's like maybe T1 crumbles. And
honestly, they could lose to DRX and be in the bin.
Is ruined, and RQ again. It's just like every team they're playing, other than like Paper X and Gen G, is a coin flip. So we'll go RQ here.
And then Bleed versus Zeta. Oh, do I want to pick Bleed? Am I that low on Zeta?
Are your Zeta hating ways going to convince you?
I'm going to guess you're going Zeta, right? This is your two teams.
I know. Do I think that Bleed will have turned the ship around by now to be able to out-firepower Zeta, or do I think that Zeta will continue to get better? Might have to flip a coin for this one.
Yeah, this is... I think I'll go Zeta. I think I'm going Zeta.
Okay, I think I'm gonna agree with you. I think I'm gonna go
Oh,
Zeta here as well, just
I wanted
because
you to pick Bleed
I
so
know
much.
you do, but I think Bleed are in that they're in the global esports category, which is not a good place
Okay,
to be.
okay,
Not a
okay.
good place to be.
No, no, no. Okay,
All
that's
right,
Pacific. What do we do next? The EMEA?
we're
Americas?
doing EMEA next.
EMEA next. Okay.
And we did quite well as far as our Preds go in EMEA. Obviously, we
I
both
picked
got
BBL
Fnatic
for some
Heretics
reason.
wrong.
I picked BBL for some reason.
I mean, you picked them because you hate the Maze logo, let's be honest.
Yeah, probably. That was
The,
a mistake, though.
the Fnatic Heretics spread that we both made was with the knowledge that Miniboo was not going to be playing and Weber was going to be playing, so I think we can be
Yes.
forgiven for that one.
Yes, we can definitely. Okay, let's dive into it then. Some interesting games in the EMEA as well, particularly to start off with. Carmine Core versus Foot. Now, my Foot stocks are high.
Yeah.
I am a Foot believer. Are they high enough to where they could beat Carmine Core, who I think looked a little shaky against Giants? They did win,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought that they didn't look as good as they did at like their peak. I thought that there was some shakiness in there. Is that enough to pick Foot though? You talk to me about this game so I can think.
Okay. So, I am on board with you being hyped about Foot. I think that we're seeing a bit of a resurgence of CNED. He just seems comfortable on this team, which I guess makes sense. You know, he's like speaking Turkish. He's got the Turkish boys around him. He also is slotting into a team that already had very good structure and team play, and he's coming in a role that is, I wouldn't say it's like easy to swap in a duelist for a duelist, but it's probably easier than to swap in, for an initiator player or something like that. Um, I think they're doing, some good stuff, some interesting stuff. They're playing cracks on KO when they feel like they should. They're playing CNET on Chamber to lean into the operator play. To be fair, they were playing Team Liquid, but they slapped Team Liquid around as one would hope that they would, considering how bad Team Liquid has looked. Carmine Core, on the other hand, I mean, they're still good. Like, their players are very good. And you say that they struggled a little bit against Giants, but they won 13-4, 13-9.
Yeah, I forgot about Breeze completely. I was only thinking about Sunset. And I remember thinking midway through Sunset, just watching some things, I was like, oh, that's not that good. But then going back and reminding myself that they won 13-4 on Breeze, yes, I remember now that game. And like, it wasn't even competitive. Like, it was such a dominant performance by Carmine Core. And
Yeah.
I just kind of forgot that they even played that map, to be honest. So that's me. That's like, I was thinking going into it, like, I should go with my heart here and pick Foot. But then I went back and thought about that, and now I don't know again. Who are you picking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to buy myself a little time here because I'm genuinely not sure either. I kind of feel like Carmine Core should win this game, but I kind of want to pick Foot and just believe in the rise of Foot.
Uh, yeah, me too. We're in the same spot. Should we both pick Foot?
I don't know. How much hate do we want from the French fans?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's both pick Foot. Let's go for it.
TMV. Why? Why must you tempt me like this?
Come on. What's the worst that could happen? If we're right, I mean, that's crazy. If we're wrong, who cares?
I'm trying to think like what the I could get way deep in. Okay, I'm gonna go Foot, and I'm gonna go Foot just because I feel like Carmine Core is probably gonna be better with prep, and Foot has shown two different weird maps with weird comps, and who knows what else they're gonna have cooked up. So I'm gonna go Foot.
Yes. Yes. And now that I've baited you into picking Foot, I'll pick Carmine Core.
Sounds good.
No, I'm actually kidding. I'm going Foot as well. Let's go. Foot. It's time. It's time, Foot. It's time to show who you truly are. In this game. Let's do it. Okay, but next game, interesting one again. Team Vitality versus Team Heretics. Now,
Nope, I'm changing
Team-
my mind. I'm going with Carmine Core.
course you are. Of course you are.
I'm going with Karmine Core. I can't. I have to. I feel like Foot is gonna just. They're gonna do some weird stuff, and Karmine Core
Okay.
structure is gonna hold up.
Okay. Vitality versus Heretics. Let's start with Heretics, because I think it's pretty easy. They looked good. Good.
Yep. Yes.
Real good.
Yes.
And yeah, that's about all there is to it. Heretics look good. I'd be surprised again, even with the roster changing and stuff. Like, as long as Woot, isn't, just drooling all over his mouse and keyboard, like, they'll still be good.
Yeah, he's not going to play this week either, though. So it's
No.
just gonna be Patatech, Miniboo.
Yep,
The
same team that's been playing for a while. Like, yep, they're chilling. And then Vitality. Now, Vitality are interesting to talk about, I think, because again, the stocks were pretty high for Vitality coming in. They started against Navi, and they played some of the best rounds that I saw of anyone to start that game.
The first like 4 rounds.
Yeah, the first like 4 or 5 rounds, it was like, oh my god, this team is unbelievable. They then proceeded to get stomped after that, pretty much.
It's so funny. How is that possible?
I don't know. Honestly, some of the rounds that they were cooking up, all their ideas, it was like, oh my goodness, this team's insane. Yeah, and then they just got stomped. So I don't really know what to think of Vitality, to be honest, because they literally showed us, like, it's there. They have it. If it's just, can they do it for an actual full game, or are they just like a team that has some cool ideas, and then once you see their ideas and you figure out, oh, that's what they're doing, you then can just like come up with a plan of how to deal with that, and then they look lost. One thing that we must talk about though is the roles, because here on TMV Corner, I've been a big believer of put safe on duelist. He's an insane duelist. I don't care if he doesn't want to play it. Whatever, right? That's just been my opinion. But even against his will, put him on that. But they also changed, at least it looks like somewhat, with Kicks as well, right? Who played Deadlock and Killjoy, I think, in their game versus Navi.
Yep.
Yeah. Whereas previously he was on like Sky and stuff like that. So a bit of a change there potentially as well. We'll see if that, maybe it was just those 2 maps, right? Maybe we'll see if that carries on. We don't quite know just yet. But either way, and that
Trex was a initiator player primarily in the past. He was like Raze and initiator.
Trex has
right?
Yeah, Trex has played. I mean, he's played initiator. He played Sentinel on some maps for Old Guild. Like he's honestly played everything. Like he played Viper in this series. Like honestly, he'll play anything and everything, which does make it a bit interesting because that seems like then we've got multiple players who perhaps can play all these different roles, but it didn't. Kicks perhaps didn't look as good as he did before when he was playing initiator. So that's maybe one for them to figure out. I think you've got to pick Heretics though in this game, right? Because of what they showed against Fnatic. I just thought they looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think factoring in their win against Fnatic for sure, but also just the fact I think this team has shown that they can grind games, and Vitality seems to crumble when the pressure's on. I mean, granted, our sample size for Vitality is like nothing, and I think Navi looked really good, but Heretics has just been in the crazy games. Like they went to Masters Madrid and they played some grinders against Sentinel. Like they know what a big game feels like. They know what it feels like to be in a must-win game. They know what it feels to lose one. So they're just not afraid of anybody at this point.
Yeah.
And I feel like Vitality has this pressure of like, we have this team that we know is supposed to be good. We know we're supposed to be good. Why are we not good? Maybe we are good, but maybe we're not good enough, And to me, I feel like those doubts are going to be maybe the downfall of Vitality over the course of this year, depending. I mean, they have a brutal schedule. They go Navi, Heretics, Foot as their first 3 games. They could end up in a spot where they're 0-3.
Oh, dearie me.
And it's just like, ooh, that is a very hard way to start your season, especially when you feel like you should be a very good team. But yeah, I'm going Heretics.
That is very tough. Okay, we're both going Heretics then. I mean, just so everyone's aware, Vitality then in the next 3 weeks play against Gentlemates, Giants, and Koi.
Yeah.
Where they'd probably be set favored in all 3 of those games. So it's not like end of the world, like Doomerism, they have no chance. It's just that's a tough start. The schedule has not been kind to Vitality off the rip here.
Yeah.
With who they've got. Next game, I'm just gonna let you talk about this one because it's Navi Liquid, and it's a great time for Team Liquid haters, of which you are the number one member of. So, talk to me about Liquid.
All right. I don't really want to talk to you about Liquid. I'm going to talk to you about
Okay.
Navi instead.
Okay.
I mean, what can I say that hasn't already been said about Navi? Angel is the GOAT. He's simultaneously the GOAT at being a troll and also the GOAT at being the GOAT. He was frying in this game against Vitality. He was taking every duel and he was sitting them down. He was like, "You're 19 with insane mechanics. You're dropping 30 bombs against everybody, and you're dead, and I'm alive, and I'm winning my team the game." I mean, this is the Doom Bros Bowl that we've had several times in the past. I'm actually really curious what the win-loss ratio is. I assume it's probably favoring Eric, who's formerly known as Doom Bros, the Navi coach. And I think it's going to continue to be that way. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think that Liquid made a mistake with their off-season moves. This is going to be kind of harsh. I don't think that Kiko is a tier 1 duelist. I mean, I think he's like skilled, but I just don't think he's a tier 1 duelist, at least yet. He needs development time. He is not able to step up to the tier 1 duelists that are actually tier 1 duelists right now. And I think that Mystic, Enzo, both kind of on the fence as well. I think there's maybe a reason that they were in tier 1 last year, or tier 2 last year. And quite frankly, I think I would prefer if this team just put Yampy on duelist and just let him be a duelist. Like he's tried to be flexible and tried to play everything, and like he's okay at all these different roles. But what makes him a unique and interesting player is when they let him off the leash and just let him like do crazy stuff, lose you some rounds, win you some rounds. And Nats just looks like he's kind of playing his own mini game in the game of the Liquid like game plan. So it's like Nats is good. He'll win you a round or two. He is making uncharacteristic mistakes here and there, but also I think it's because he's literally just like he's playing 1v5 and then the rest of the team is playing 4v5. And it's just like, it's not a good system that they're working with right now. So I think this is a pretty easy Navi win for me.
Yeah, Navi should win this pretty convincingly. It is interesting for Liquid, I think, right? Because Yampy is almost like he's a great player who, like you say, is like okay at every role.
Yeah.
Which is like such a weird, like I can't think of really anyone else like that where it's like, what is Yampy's best role? Like a chamber maybe, I guess, but obviously you're not going to be playing chamber all the time.
Yeah.
You can't just one trick chamber these days. So it's like, I don't know what you do with Yampy. He's almost like a problem because it's like, you're obviously a great player, so I don't want to drop you.
Yeah.
But how do you fit into a team? Like how could, like, if you're such a good player, I want to be getting the best out of you, but I don't know where that is because I mean they've tried. Yampy's been on duelist before, right? But then there's been problems with that as well, where he's maybe a bit too passive. He's not like fully entering with the team. Maybe he just doesn't fit that style. Like, so there is problems, right? And I do think. I think that look, Enzo, Mystic, Kaiko, like you're picking up the core of what was essentially like what most people thought was the best tier 2 team last year, right, in EMEA. But then when you think about that as a decision, it's like, well, yeah, the best tier 2 team you would expect to be like a mid-table team,
right? And this team wasn't even like the best one because they didn't win. Yeah,
like max, you would expect them to be like a mid-table team.
Yeah.
So it is like an interesting decision to do that anyway, because a lot of maybe the other successful, like a Team Heretics, for instance, or a Karmi Core, right? They were just bringing in like, who is the best player on this good tier 2 team? Mm-hmm. We'll bring them in, and we'll bring this guy who was the best player on their team, right? And instead of just picking up a core, they were like, let's just bring in all of the Exodia pieces from tier 2 essentially,
right?
And
exactly.
that worked. So yeah, I mean. Team Liquid haters, this is your dream, I think, because I don't think they'll be that great. Even though they did beat Koi, but that's no big surprise. And speaking of games that wow. Wow, this
Talk
is
to me.
this. I
Talk to
mean,
me.
if you like getting slathered up in mud, as Sideshow would say, and getting down and wrestling in the mud, this is the game for you because BBL are playing coy.
Who is winning this game?
I'm gonna go straight on the bat. And I'm gonna say I picked BBL against Gentlemates.
Yep.
I'm not picking BBL this entire year, even against Koi. I'm picking Koi. I'm never picking BBL again. I've made that mistake once already.
Oh man.
There is a real in fact, I know it right now that what will happen in this game is BBL are going to win one game this year. It's going to be against Koi because they're just going to out aim them, and then I'm going to hate BBL even more because then I'll pick wrongly again. But I'm not picking BBL. I refuse. I'm picking Koi.
I mean, Koi looked tragic, though, man. They looked
They
tragic.
That was against Team Liquid, who then also looked tragic.
Exactly.
Later
That's
on.
what I have to go BBL because Koi lost to Liquid, and Liquid is in the.
Well, I thought the
dumpster as
BBL
fuck.
looked tragic as well. Like I picked them against Gentlemates, so I was rooting for them, and I still don't really think Gentlemates are like that great. But
Listen,
go on.
I'm closing my eyes, and I'm just gonna choose to remember sunshine and rainbows, and then associate that randomly with BBL.
Go on. Yeah, you pick BBL because
Yeah.
then we'll have a rooting interest in this game, and we'll
Yeah.
care about the result of what almost certainly will be one of the worst games you will see all year. This is the thing. When it comes to Valorant, I would rather, a part of me really would rather watch this game than, for instance, like fucking Team Secret versus, Giants or something, right?
Yeah.
Like who cares teams? Like I'd rather watch the worst teams play against each other because I think it's more, it's fun. It's just fun. It's more fun, right? It's more fun to just watch a car crash than it is to watch paint dry. There you
That's
go.
a quote from TMV. All right, put that one on a billboard somewhere. Speaking of a car crash, Fnatic against Giant X is our next game.
Two car crashes for different reasons. Different levels of car crash.
Yeah,
let's put it that way.
Fnatic is the sports car that's getting in a tiny little fender bender. They've got a little nick on their bumper, and Giants is rolling their Jeep down a hill.
The damage might be worse than they first thought with the Fnatic one.
True. I'm still picking Fnatic over Giants because Redguard dropped
100%.
77 ACS over an entire series, and that is just not acceptable in any sense of the word.
Man, yeah.
77 ACS for an entire series.
That's tough. Yeah, if you ever want to insult someone's character, just say their ACS is double digits. Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, obviously Fnatic will win this game. If Fnatic don't win this game, fucking blow it up.
Redgar had 8 kills across 2 maps with 8 first deaths and no first kills.
That is rough. 8 kills in 2 maps. Like, if you think of like all the times you've played Valorant, obviously it's not a pro game, but I don't think I've ever gone 2 games. I've get like maybe when I was in Iron, like when I first started playing the game. 8 kills in 2 games? That's tough.
Average damage per round of 56. That's like 1.5 phantom bullets. 1.5 phantom body shots per round is all you're landing.
That's tough. But yeah, let's talk about Fnatic though, because Giants look like Cloud and Friends. It really, people use that a lot, but it does feel like that. And my stock for them is low. I mean, the bottom of EMEA, oh my goodness, it's rough out here. But Fnatic, let's talk about them. So they lost to Heretics. They got destroyed on their own pick of Icebox.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't look like they knew how to play the comp that well. Personally, they were taking some awful decisions. Lotus, I thought, was better. I mean, it couldn't be much worse. If it was worse, then we'd have problems. But I did think that Lotus, it was a close game against a good team, right? And I thought they had some nice calls. I thought they did some nice stuff. I thought it wasn't that bad. Like, had both maps been like Lotus and they still would have lost 2-0, I would have been like, okay.
Well,
and obviously,
of course their Lotus wasn't bad. It's the same comp they've been running for a year and a half. How could they possibly be bad at this comp?
Yeah, that's true. They did come out afterwards and say that, you know, they were ill and stuff like that, which sure, whatever, cool. Um, I, I mean, it must have been messing with their minds in map one as well. It must have really clouded their minds because some of the decisions they were making were awful, just awful decisions. And yeah, I don't know what the long-term prospects of this team is, but I came into this season, you know, we came in talking about Fnatic this split as if with confidence, right? They're gonna make Shanghai.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm gonna ask you maybe we should do this every week after Fnatic play. Do Fnatic make Shanghai right now?
Let me look at their group. I need to remind myself. BBL Liquid Carmine Court. Make Shanghai. The fact that I'm having to deliberate is a little worrying. Yeah. I was like, yes, they'll beat Foot. And then I was like, wait, Heretics is also a possibility. And Navi's there, and Carmine Core's there. Will they make Shanghai? Yes.
I'd say
Yes.
no right now. Right now,
I'm
I'd say no.
I'm not going to give any justification. I'm just going to say
Yeah,
yes.
no, yeah, I'm happy with that. But we're
Okay.
both picking them to beat Giants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then Carmine Core versus Gentle Mates, the French derby. Carmine Core are the team that have to play twice this week. I've got them losing to Foot. I don't see I'm going with them in the French derby. Again, my Gentle Mate stock is honestly higher now, to be honest, because now that we've seen all the teams play, like there's so many teams at the bottom of EMEA that I'm like, oh my god, the Gentle Mates therefore just by default I've ended up looking like, oh okay,
Yeah.
like okay, they're fine.
Unlucky for Gentle Mates that they're in the group that they're in. Because they would make the playoffs in Alpha Group, but in Omega Group, they have to somehow edge out Foot, Navi, or Heretics, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah, 100%. If they were in the other group, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about them. Well, am I? No. I'm not sure I'm feeling good about them there either, because I still think Vitality would probably be better than them. But, yeah, they might just, in either group, they might have been the fourth place team, which is where I think they are. I think they're just like the seventh team, which unfortunately doesn't get you to playoffs. But it makes you better than some, but not Carmine Core. So are you going Carmine Core as well?
Yeah, I'm going Carmine Core. I mean, I think the thing about Gentlemates is that they're basically just the team that we thought they were, like, coming out of Ascension, which is that they will randomly show up on a day and Natonk will drop 75 kills across 2 maps and they'll just be out fragging everybody. And then they'll have some, like, very spaghetti rounds, and then some of their game plans will be too one-dimensional, but like they're decent, but they're not excellent, basically.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Okay, there's the EMEA, and now we move on to Americas, which was, I mean, I had a woeful week of picking Americas.
Yeah, what was your record, TMV?
I went 1-5, 1 of 5 in Americas. I only got one right, and that was NRG. So yeah, tough week for me. I did initially pick G2 and changed my mind to EG, which was a big mistake. I should have just stuck with my gut on EG. That they're not very good. Anyway, moving on to Americas. Our first game. Interesting one. Very interesting one. G2 versus 100 Thieves. I'll let you talk about either team.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually be pretty straightforward with this one. I'm gonna pick G2, and I'm gonna go with G2 because I feel like we saw the guard playing, basically. Because even when the guard won Ascension, I wouldn't say that Tex was the reason that they won Ascension. I feel like their team play of like Trent and Valen and Jonah P, like that was the reason that they won Ascension. Was those players like really showing up consistently. And that's what we saw in week number 1 against EG. They just straight up diffed EG, like with skill and also with just their structure. Jonah P, Val, and Trent were insane. They were the top 3 players in terms of like all stats on both maps. Leaf and Icy were were there as well. Icy was kind of just there in spirit in a lot of cases. But really, this team is won and lost when Val and Trent and Jonapi show up, and they showed up. And I think that G2 have maybe the best comp on Icebox right now. And Icebox is probably 100 Thieves' best map, and I think that G2 will flatten them there.
Wow. Okay. So let me talk as someone who was publicly on the 100 Thieves train. You know, was a real believer in 100 Thieves, where they were going, what they were doing, and watching it live. You know, they're playing against Sentinels, tough game, right? Tough, unlucky. And on Icebox, I thought I saw a lot of like, okay, that was good. Hey, that was pretty good. And you know, Cryo in particular, I thought had some really nice moments of him being like, you know, much
Cryo
more
looked
aggressive.
really good.
Yeah,
Cryo looked
much more
really
aggressive than perhaps he would normally would. Yeah, and so I was like, oh, that looks good. Then came Split, and it's interesting. I was in the call with Sideshow and Bren, and Sideshow was saying like, you know, that for him, for his long-term develop, for what he wants 100 Thieves to be, he was saying like, just put Cryo on full-time duelist, and you know, do what you did on Icebox, and put Asner on full-time, you know, initiator, and just make that the way that you're going with this team, which I think might be a decent idea, right? Instead, we got Cryo playing on Astra. It's a completely different role, and watching it live, I was like, oh, the Sentinels are just playing, you know, they're just playing well, they're just beating them. Rewatching it and making a video for it, I was like, what are they doing? They look so it just wasn't good. Like there was no part of it where like on Split where I was thinking like, oh that's good. There was like barely anything other than like a couple, you know, individual moments. Like little brief moments. And like just some of the ideas I just don't think made any sense. You know, when I was watching their attack side, I was like, how does this make sense? Right? How does it make sense to fade ult into B Heaven and then do a B exec? Like when you know that you're pushing the guy in Heaven into your B exec, like he's going to run onto rafters because he just got fade ulted, and then be staring straight at your B exec as you're doing it. And there's like, it's not that you can, like, how the fuck do you pinch on B Heaven? Like, from B main? How? And it wasn't even a pinch, because then your fade runs back to B main too. So it wasn't even a pinch.
Yeah.
Not that you can really pinch on B Heaven, to be honest, from that angle, necessarily. And I was just like, that round just can never work. Who did you run this round against that it worked? What setup? If anyone is on site, you are in such trouble when you're just doing an exec with like one bit of utility. They didn't exec with one Dizzy Flash Elevated in 2024.
Yeah, I would say that's the most worrying thing to me about 100 Thieves is that their utility usage across both maps was horrendous. It was awful. There was one particular round on Icebox that I remember where Cryo's pushed up aggressively. They're playing defense. He's pushed up aggressively up to like Maze, peeking into kind of like A main. And they have Asuna standing on top of screens, and they have EU standing in the back with Hunter's Fury. He's like on back steps. Cryo takes the first duel, gets a kill, tries to get out. Asuna doesn't throw the Dizzy, just sits there, watches Cryo get killed, still doesn't throw the Dizzy, then just swings and dies with no utility used. EU doesn't use Hunter's Fury to save Cryo and like combo something as they're coming over pipes. Waits until they're actually already on site, then just goes for a completely dry Hunter's Fury to try and get a kill. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, you actually had the setup correct, but then nobody pressed their buttons. And so the only times that they actually looked good in this was when Cryocells was just winning them rounds by himself.
Yeah. Yeah. It was... I mean, I said it at the time, to be honest, like, hey, I'm getting on this 100 Thieves roller coaster, and I'm fully ready for it to go disastrously wrong. I didn't think it would be straight away. Like, I thought it would be like, you know, after a couple weeks, like, maybe they'd given you some hope, and then, like just the bottom fell out, and it was dashed. But it was dashed straight away. Like,
It It turns
I
out
don't
that you're
know.
not on a roller coaster. You're just on one of those Tower of Terrors where it just starts at the top and
Yeah,
just drops you
yeah.
straight
I've
down.
just gone straight down. Yeah, I thought we were going on a steady climb before the drop.
Yeah.
Instead, my feet have just fallen beneath me. Um, yeah. So, but do I still believe? See, G2 though, they looked good. Like they
There's no
looked
way
like
you still believe.
no, there isn't. I'm picking G2. I have
Okay.
to pick G2. I think there's just no way. Speaking of, like, again, we got a similar sort of pattern in this game where one team, where maybe both teams are coming in with some level of expectation. One team
Yep.
looked good, the other team not so good. Sentinels versus Leviathan. Now, I think we both know who we're picking in this game, unless
Yep.
you have gone crazy.
No. There's
Sentinels,
no.
we don't need to spend too much time on, right?
No.
Sorry, Sen fans. And this is the thing, like Sen fans, you don't need to be insecure about your team anymore. They're good. Like
Yep.
you can just chill. They're good.
We're not going to talk
Uh,
about you until something bad happens, probably.
yeah, basically, because we know that they're good at this point, and they looked good, and they won, and cool. But Lev, oh,
Ooh, boy.
Lev. Now, look, I like to think I was early on this train of
Hmm.
Lev might just completely collapse, and I feel like we hit not just step one, but step two and three of that in the Cloud9 game. Not only, and that's the thing, like the game, like if you just looked at the scores and you didn't know the teams and you didn't know the names, you'd look at the scores and you'd be like, hey, they lost 18-16 map 3. You know, oh, they almost won the game. Like whatever, they lost 18-16, unlucky. That's normally what I would say.
Yep.
But some of those rounds for Red and Leviathan were unbelievable. They were not good. And I mean, look, they had like if you want to say that, oh, but the win conditions for Leviathan are that Aspas is hitting and the King is hitting. Well, they were, and they still lost.
Aspas,
That's how bad it was.
He dropped 300 ACS average across 3 maps, 200 ADR average across 3 maps, 1.4 rating. He went plus 32 kills, and they still lost.
Like, yeah. Like
I,
that.
I, I put out a call on the coaching Discord that I'm in. I was like, has anybody ever lost a match with stats this good? And the only ones that people could send me were like some random tier 3 tournament and something going plus 62
Yeah,
and
in the
losing
first
in
class,
Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is great. And like I said, like if you're like hopium for Leviathan is, oh, but Aspas is gonna be always good, and King, particularly on map 3 was dealing. Like if that's your hopium for this team, well, that happened and they still lost to a Cloud9 that I don't think looked amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't think the Cloud9 were particularly that impressive either.
Yeah.
And so like that is a massive, massive worry. And yeah, if they play close to what they did against Cloud9, they don't have a chance. They have no chance against Sentinels. Like call an ambulance. It's already over.
I think the biggest problem is even if they play good,
Yeah.
even if they're good against Sentinels, they will still lose. They need to be
Yes.
like incredible
They need to
against
play their
Sentinels.
best game they have.
And it's not going to
after
happen.
that performance, there's just no way. There's just no way. I mean, Aspas could continue to fry. I believe in that. We could see, King have a good performance again. Maybe even Com, who had a really rough game, steps it up and plays better. Maybe all of them play better. They wouldn't be hard, other than Aspas. But like, just some of the, you can just see it is disjointed.
Yeah.
Like it just. There are so many rounds. There are so many examples of just like clearly not being on the same page or just not doing stuff fast enough, like we were talking about with Bleed. Like they do stuff slow, right? And that's the thing. Valorant, I think, and particularly when we're talking about like the top teams, right? Like the thing that separates the top teams often is that they do stuff quick. Everything they do is quick. They know what each other are doing. And so when you're the opposite of that, that's not good.
That right there is what makes Sentinels an elite team right now. Is that everything they're doing is like it's as if one person is controlling the whole team.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're both picking Sen.
We're picking Sentinels, and it does not get easier from here for Leviathan.
Remember when we had a bet on this game in kickoff? And then you made me buy the DFM bundle because Leviathan lost to Sentinels.
Yeah.
God, we are far away from that point.
We certainly are. Lev goes on to play NRG after this week, so very high chance that they start the season 0-3, and at that point, roster changes probably coming up.
That's a rough. The schedule makers have given you a rough one there. Similar to T1, like, hey, we gave you a game that you should have won week
Yeah.
1, and then you lost it, and so it's like, okay, next game, tough one to kind of think about because it's Crew MIBR, and MIBR didn't play, so all of our takes about MIBR are whatever they were before.
Yep.
And then Crew, Crew. I didn't watch the third map of the Crew Fury game, but I watched the first 2, and even though Crew lost one of those maps, I thought it wasn't that bad. I thought, okay, that looks fairly solid, and they won against Fury, which is a good sign. I still don't think they're going to be amazing. I actually think this is a good test for both teams. I think this will be a nice understanding where these two teams are, because whoever wins, particularly if someone wins convincingly, I'll probably feel pretty good about them. But it wouldn't shock me if either team lost and looked pretty bad.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing. Crew, my main concern with them, and actually the reason I picked Furia over them, is because I was really worried that Heat was going to come in and totally ruin what they'd built. Because I thought that in kickoff, they actually looked like they had some promise. I thought Shy looked good on this team. I thought MTA was a very, very good rookie prospect. I thought his utility was incredible on his KO and stuff like that. I thought losing him was going to be a huge deal. But Heat looked really good. He played Fade. He played 2 maps of KO. His KO was incredible. He top fragged and top assists on both maps where he played KO. His Fade was good. He was not, he was not trying to do too much from a role it's not supposed to be like the star. And Kesnet is legitimately one of the best players in the world. Just straight up.
There are just moments where he just does stuff that you're like, not many people could do that.
Yeah. He's like in the same tier as like a Zekken type player, like legitimately. And so I think for me, I'm probably going to favor Crew a little bit. I think that MIBR's strength is their team play. It's not their firepower. And I think that Crew is a team that has enough structure to where they're not going to just like completely fall apart when MIBR plays like slow and like wins pistols and gets them down. And I think that the firepower on Crew is just way superior to MIBR. And also, the coach, I don't know if you listened, I guess you probably didn't listen to the interview afterwards, but he was talking about kind of like their whole process and like what it was like getting Heat into the team. And he basically was just saying like, we are a momentum team. Like these guys are all about the vibes. It's actually why Heat is fitting in well, because everybody's just kind of like talking shit and like having a good time. And we're very much a momentum team. And we saw what happens when they win one game last year at LCQ. And I feel like getting this win is going to make them feel really good. And I think that what they do well is what MIBR does not do well. And so I'm going to pick Crew in this one.
See, I was going back and forth on this because I think that MIBR have the obvious advantage of they haven't played yet and they can watch Crew. And, Crew played 3 maps, so they have like 3 maps of data where they know pretty much what Crew are going to do, which I do think is a pretty, big advantage for MIBR to have a whole week of prep, essentially. But yeah, I'm kind of with you that I feel like if Kesnet and like, I mean, he just needs like a bit of help. But I can definitely see like against a team like MIBR, who, as you say, are less about firepower, I think, and more about their structure and team play, that like they might struggle to deal with like a Kesnet, right?
Yeah.
That kind of might be the opposite of the kind of team that they're good against. And so I'm join you, I think, on picking Crew, but I could see MIBR winning it with the extra prep time. That wouldn't shock me either.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I think this is a very, very close match. And actually, I will say, I think the Crew Fury match was like maybe one of the best matches in week 1. It was good. It was a banger.
Yeah. Okay. A game that probably won't be a banger though, NRG Furia, because Furia, again, like as you said, like I had very low expectations for that game. I was expecting a mud bowl, but it actually wasn't that muddy, and I thought Furia had some nice moments too as well. Less so than Crew, but it wasn't like awful. But NRG stomped loud, and they looked like unbelievable. So I'm gonna pick NRG.
Yeah, this is a different, like these teams are in different tiers. They're just in different tiers, and that's all I'm really gonna say.
Okay, good. And then Cloud9 versus EG. Now, as I said, I wasn't like super, even though they beat Lev, and there was some nice moments for Cloud9, but I wasn't like, wow, Cloud9. I thought that that was really quite muddy. But EG were caked in mud. They couldn't see for how much mud was on their eyes. And I think you really saw, and we saw it in the game against Loud a bit as well, like, but the lack of shooting back sometimes for EG.
Hmm.
I mean, against Loud, I remember distinctly feeling like I saw quite a few kills where it's like, you should definitely get that kill.
Yeah.
And I think that that happened in their game against G2 as well, where it's like,
Yeah.
there was multiple times where I was like, you have to get that kill, and they didn't. And they ended up getting rolled. And so I think I have to go with Cloud9.
Yeah, I think I'm going with Cloud9 also. And I think the main thing about EG, I'd say the main positive from EG is that Nature's a good player. He's a good player. You know, he's shooting back. The rest of the team is not shooting back very much. I think Jogamo is maybe struggling without having that extra bit of firepower around him. And I think that Apoth in particular, I mean, I don't want to single out people too much, but I think that he's looked very inexperienced. He's like consistently dying in weird spots. He's like running out with a knife out instead of a gun in a situation that doesn't make any sense. He's like going first on a lurk when his team is supposed to be pressuring first. He just looks like he's a little bit lost more than anybody else. And then Superman and Derek have good moments, but they are also very inconsistent. So they have like one very consistent player, which has been Nature. Jogamo's underperforming. I think he'll probably step it up. But I think that Cloud9 is probably going to be one of those teams, very much like last year's Cloud9, where they get a little bit of momentum and they're like, okay, well, this is better than expected. You know, we can do something with this, and maybe we can build on this. And I think that that confidence is going to do wonders for players like Oxy, for Moose. I am going to be perfectly honest. I think that Cloud9's showing this last week just proves that cutting Rooney was a mistake. I think that he was probably their best player last year or close to it. And aside from Zelsis, I guess. But I think that he looked like he was exactly in the form of last year. Like, he's insanely good with his aim. And probably it's going to help him to not have to be the one that's main calling as well. So his performance might get even better. But he's like a vibes guy. He looks confident on stage. And I think that, I think Cloud9's going to take this one pretty easily, actually.
Okay, I agree. Also good for Loud. They're the team that gets the week off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it feels like
Deserved.
that's deserved. Yeah, that you deserve the week off, Loud. You take your time. You know, get back into the swing of things. Come back the week after and stomp people again.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, that's America's. Let's finish up with China. Where, I mean, again, my pick'ems, my belief in Wolves hurt. Let's just put it like that.
What happened to Wolves?
Let's not talk about it. Again, they should have won that first game, and then it's the exact same thing that happened at kickoff. Let's not get to Wolves first, though. Let's go to our first game, which is JDG versus Nova. Now, JDG lost to EDG.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, how much do you want to take away from it? They did win a map, which, I mean, like, it is like a genuine achievement for a lot of these Chinese teams, is winning a map off EDG. So, you know, you definitely can look at it from that stance and go like, okay, that's good. And I definitely think, you know, and again, I didn't watch, I think I missed the first map of this. Yeah, I did. But then did watch the second two. And so from what I watched them win a map against EDG and then play a close split against EDG. I didn't watch them get destroyed 13-5 on Acend, which I assume looked a lot worse. But of the two maps that I saw versus the Chinese teams, you know, you always have to kind of, I'm trying to do the kind of shift for some of the Chinese play that you have to see sometimes. But I think versus that in this kind of sphere, I'm feeling pretty decent about them, particularly playing against Nova, who I don't think are very good.
Yeah, they're very clearly one of the bottom two teams in the league. JDG, they've got better firepower than most of the other Chinese teams outside of like EDG, FPX probably. I think this is pretty easy. JDG wins, and that's about
Yeah.
all there is really to talk about.
Okay, next one, FPX versus DRG. Now, DRG, like, let me put it this way. DRG finished in the top 4 in kickoff. In that game that I watched versus FPX, I was like, this team is not that good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, clearly not that good.
Mm-hmm.
They then played against AG, who were seen as one of the worst teams, and AG clearly have gotten better and leveled up somewhat, and they beat DRG, and they look like the better team doing it. FPX, whilst obviously we know at international level, FPX don't look that great, but against Chinese level teams, they stomp them.
Yeah,
So
they clear.
this one's clear FPX for me, no issues whatsoever.
I will agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that's all.
Okay.
I only watch bits and pieces of the Chinese league because a lot of these games, like I watch like one map and I'm like, this team is awful, this team is pretty good, or this team is mid, or whatever. I'll just make kind of snap decisions, but it's pretty obvious, I think. And overall, I think just the region is in 2023 as far as we're concerned, like development wise. There's like a couple of good teams. There's several good players that are kind of like distributed randomly on the teams, and then next year it'll be a lot more interesting.
Yeah, next game is AG versus Wolves. My boys Wolves. Oh dearie me. I mean, look, the first game that they played against Tech was literally a 1v1. Like a literal two Smurfs going at each other, Aluba and RB. It was literally like if you killed Aluba for Tech, or if you killed RB for Wolves, that you won the round. Like it's over. Round's done. Congratulations, we won the round. We killed their Smurf. Like that's I've never seen a game like that. I genuinely can't think of a game like that where just one player from each team is dominating everyone.
Yeah.
And everyone else in the server is not doing that much. It honestly, like sometimes you get, team stomps, sometimes it's close. I don't think I've ever seen that where it's close because two people on either team are just stomping. And then they lost to FPX, and I do like again, the exact same thing happened to them that it did at kickoff, where they won. Like they played a game that they should have won, and that they looked, in my opinion, they did look like the better team overall, but they lost to RB literally solo. And then, like they did against DDG, they then have to play against a decent team or a good team in FPX for Chinese standards, like straight away afterwards. And, that's tough. And they've had more time to prep than you. And, they're a good team, and so they didn't look that great in that game. AG did look better. Like from where I thought that they were one of the worst Chinese teams, they did look better against DRG. I'm sticking with it though. I'm saying that Wolves will win. As long as this team can get their mental right, I think that they are a better team, and so I'm picking them. Feel free to pick against them. Do it at your own peril.
Yeah. Man, I don't know.
Go do it. Do it.
I do agree that Wolves has a lot of talent, but I'm just worried about the mental crumble that they've shown multiple times now. And like maybe they're out of confidence, and AG is feeling relatively good. I mean, sure, just for fun, I'll pick AG. I kind of think that Wolves is going to win this, but I'm going to go AG just for the memes.
Well, the spring needs to wake up. Spring has sprung. The calendar, I'm looking at
outside.
The spring has sprung, but not in game. It hasn't. We're still in a dark winter in game, apparently, because I thought he looked really good at kickoff, but then in these two games, he just wasn't hitting the same. It must be said. And so if Wolves are going to win, they're going to need spring to sprung. Okay, moving on. Trace versus Billy.
This is an interesting game.
Yeah, it is an interesting game because Trace, I kind of said it coming in. I thought that they were the third best team in China. Thus far, I think they have looked like the third best team in China, pretty much. But Billy as well, I thought looked probably a little better than I expected. I mean, they got stomped on Bind, but and then they stomped Tyloo back twice. So maybe they still have some map pool problems. It's a tough one for Billy because, of course, like the name just represents beating NRG, and these players, and it's like that's all that I can think about. But
right,
I still think that Trace are a better team. Every time I watch Trace play, I did watch their game. I thought, they're just pretty good.
Yeah, Yeah, I think I'm kind of on board with that. I mean, I think like YZ's had kind of a resurgence. He's looked
Mm.
pretty decent in most of their games. Um, I think the rest of Billy is a little bit up and down still. You know that again, it's hard to separate them from the wins over energy last year, and the parents at champions and actually looking competitive and all of that. But if I had to just look at the overall team play, I think I'm probably going to go Trace, and I think that's probably why I'm going to pick them as well.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Okay, next game, DRG versus Tech, Team RB, as it was against Wolves.
Yep.
If RB plays even close to that again, I mean DRG are kind of a similar team with Vukashu in many of their games, is carrying them and whatnot. But I'm not impressed with DRG to be honest, and so I'm happy to go for Team RB, um, because he's good.
Yeah, I think
So
I'm
RB is
basically just
good.
gonna pick RB.
Yeah.
I think I'm basically just gonna pick RB. I agree. I think DRG is now in that stage where it's like, okay, the only reason that we've been winning games basically is because Vukushu is a better player than everybody else in tier two, and the pieces around him are just kind of running around doing stuff. And it's going to stop working now that teams are in franchising or partnership and are getting better consistently. And if DRG is not getting better consistently, which it doesn't appear like they are, then they're going to fall behind and get continually worse against the field, which I think is kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then finally, our last game we're
Boom,
talking about in the
EDG.
week will be a very quick one, I think. Tyloo versus EDG. I mean, EDG, even though they did lose a map, JDG are probably better than Tyloo. EDG are gonna win.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's just talk for. I know you have to get out of here, but let's just talk for like 2 minutes about EDG. What are your sort of overall takeaways of EDG? Maybe combining kickoff and this first week, and guess what we saw at Madrid. Like, is this team on the right path, or are they kind of hitting a ceiling? Like, what's the deal with them? Because I'm not impressed by them, but they're clearly better than everybody else in China. And it's like,
Yes.
how do they get better if their competition is not good? And they're doing this weird thing where they're basically like moving Kong Kong off the primary duelist role in a lot of cases. They're putting life on
Smoggy.
sorry, they're putting Smoggy in the primary entry role, which is
Mm.
maybe fine, but also they're taking the op out of Kong Kong's hands in a lot of cases, and Kong Kong is clearly the best opper in the world. Period.
Yeah, it makes some sense. So yeah, it's kind of weird because on Split, Kong Kong is playing Ray still, and Smoggy's playing Omen. But on Bind, Smoggy's playing Raze and Kangkang's playing KO. And
Yeah,
then on Ascent, Smoggy and I can't remember an Ascent game where Kangkang wasn't on Jet before. I don't remember that being the case. So this must be a somewhat new thing that they've put him on KO and they've got Smoggy on Jet there instead, which I'm
I
totally
think it
with you.
used to be
Like,
switched. I'm pretty sure it used to be Kong Kong
yeah,
Jet and Smoggy was KO.
yeah. So
Yes,
it's not
yeah,
even like Smoggy can't play the role. He has
yeah,
played the role before. So
yeah.
I don't really get it. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, look, did this team need to make some kind of shuffle? Did they need to make maybe some kind of change to, rejuvenate, and stuff like that? Yeah, probably. Is that the change that I would make? I don't even think that change would have come to my mind. Of
Yeah,
like, let's get Kang off the op.
yeah,
Let's put him on a role where he's going to be upping less. I think that would be literally the last thing I would think of. I would think, what's our biggest strength? Kang upping.
yeah.
I would be doing the exact opposite of that. I would be looking at, oh, maybe we can play. What maps can we play Chamber on, right? Like, and just have him like full time up. Like that would be my mindset rather than,
Yeah.
you know, than this. So yeah, it's very weird. My overall expectation, what I think of them, I just think that they will make every event, and my hope is that just by the time that we get to champs, that they look competitive, that they look
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a 2024 team. That's my hope. That's what I want to see. I forget finishing, top three or whatever. I'd be happy if at champs they make playoffs and they look like, okay, this is a team that looks like they belong somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is that if they just stay at the level they're at right now for the entire year, which I feel like is maybe possible,
Yeah.
I think they might not be the best team in China by the end of the year. And that would be
Yeah, that's
sad
definitely possible.
because they should be, because they're so far
Yeah.
ahead of everybody else
Yeah.
coming into this year.
Yeah. When Wolves overtake them, that's going to be tough for everyone
Then
to. That's a
spring will have
tough.
truly sprung.
Yeah, yeah. Spring maybe is just a bit late this year. Okay, just you wait. Once we start getting into like June and maybe spring is just a bit late.
Yep.
And we'll be there by then. Any closing thoughts?
I am happy with the parity of the leagues in terms of like we've had teams that we didn't expect to be good be better than expected. We've had teams that we thought would be good maybe fall down in the middle of the pack. I think it's going to be a really interesting year, and it's probably good that there's no mega dominant team right now, because it feels like teams don't really know what's going on in the meta. There's nobody like, oh, everybody just copy Fnatic's comps on all of these maps. Right now, it feels like everybody's kind of doing their own thing, which is really nice to see. And yes, there's still some like old comps and stuff like that. But Boaster was literally asking for a new Icebox comp on Twitter because they don't know how to win the map right now. And so like it's good
From
that
Elevated, from this idiot that I'm talking to. Not
From
like
me.
asking, just put it Bosa tweeting out like to all of his fans, like someone give me an Icebox comp
Yeah.
might have been a better idea than asking Elevate.
True. Yeah. Any final thoughts from you?
I think that you messed up in that tweet. I think that you should have like truly gone off the fucking rails and just put out there some bizarre comp that like has just no theory behind it whatsoever, just as a troll.
I was going to suggest a breach comp, but then I was like,
Yeah.
there's no way. There's no way they'll play this. Maybe there's a chance that they'll play the one that I suggest, and then I can be like, that's my comp when I watch them next week.
Yeah,
But if I put
that's
a
what
breach
you
comp,
want.
there's no shot
way.
that they try it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Hey guys, have you tried like Neon Cypher? Like really good. Okay. That's it. End this thing.
Cool. Peace. We'll see you next week, guys. Thanks.